Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and these are my co-hosts.
Christopher Wells.
Dak Prescott's number one fan.
We appreciate all the support on our recent content. Before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes, we're back at it again with another new episode for all of you. And we'll start off with, so the last time we recorded, we may have jinxed something. So we were talking about the Warriors, and we were talking about, their struggles and kind of the up and down nature of their season. And they were in the middle of playing the Houston Rockets. And one of the things I said was, okay, no Durant, they're probably going to win this game. And the other thing Top Notch said was, yeah, at some point they're going to get hurt. It's just going to happen. Well, both things basically happened at the same time, right? So the Warriors ended up losing to the Rockets, and they also lost Steph Curry in the process. He's supposed to be out for at least a week from that game. He got a quad contusion. So they already had played one game against, New Orleans. But it's tough, right? Because their offense had already not been great. With Steph, they're, over the course of the season, they're bottom 10 in the league in offensive rating. With Steph, they are better, right? But the problem is when he's not out there or when he's off the floor, they're not very good. So they're going to have to find a way to get some more wins without their best player and without the guy that makes all of this work, right? When you have some of these other pieces that aren't the perfect fits or aren't necessarily the best or most talented players, he's the guy that makes all of this work and all of this run. So I guess, the question is, just kind of as another quick update, like where are we at with the Warriors thus far this season, right? Because this was one of those teams that they went to the second round last year. Obviously, Steph gets hurt against Minnesota. And then in the offseason, obviously everybody was making fun of the fact that they took forever to make all their signings. I remember doing all those shorts wondering, what are they going to do with Kuminga? When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And despite all that, right, they were still looked at as one of the better teams, contending teams in the Western Conference, right, with a chance to go even further, maybe conference finals, maybe finals or whatever. But where are we at thus far with them on the season? Because outside of the vets, right, who've by and large been there and have been really good, it's not a whole lot of other positives. Maybe a couple young guys like Will Richard, have stood out. Quentin Post, I guess, looks a little better. But what do we think so far of them at this point in the season? Because they're pretty much, past the 20 game mark. They've played, I think, the most games of any team. So they're already past the quarter point in the season.
Yeah, I'm not really feeling it too much, right? This is, in my opinion, probably a 500 team at best, right? We kind of predicted that Steph was probably going to miss a little bit of time, right? Just because of his age and, the point that he's at in his career, right? But regardless of that, you look at the talent that's surrounding them, it's not that great, right? Like Steph and Jimmy, that's a great duo, right? You always have a chance with Steph. Obviously, we know this, but the collective talent around those guys is not great. They're old, I don't want to say, like Clippers old, but they are pretty old, right? So the reliability isn't necessarily there, especially at the top end, of that bench as well, right? You have guys that you're relying on like Pajemski, right? And then you also have the question of Kuminga, right? So I don't really feel like this roster is necessarily complete. I feel like the team would probably be better if they could find a better role for Kuminga or just simply go out and trade him, which I think, will probably be happening once he is trade eligible or whatever. I think around, December, January or whatever. So
January 15th.
exactly. So I am curious, what the final state of that roster is going to look like. But right now, I really don't see this team being much better than a 500 team. So I think they're playing bound, and that's kind of why I took the under on them.
So this is a bad team, man. Warriors record without Curry all time is 92 and 154. It tells you they need him, right? And we all know that, right? That's common sense. But they especially need him this year because even with Curry, they're still losing. And so without him, you could beat the Pelicans, cool and all, but like when you need big wins, that's who you go to, right? They traded for Jimmy Butler, which I'll be honest with you, Jimmy he's okay, right? He's giving you the 26 and 5, but he wanted all this money in the world. He's supposed to be the difference maker, when Steph goes out, and you got to step up and win games, right? Like you're the second highest paid, I believe, off this team. And I'm not just talking about one game or like let's stay competitive. Let's keep us up in the race in the Western Conference. That's why you have two star players in your roster that get paid that much money. If Jimmy sits out, Steph Curry's going to win you games no matter what because this is who Steph is. So this is a bad team overall. I was actually high on them. I'm like, okay, Steph, Jimmy, Kuminga, Pods. But Pods is just a player that has everybody thinks he's going to be an all-star superstar player. Hasn't really sorted out right. Moses Moody's just playing Moses Moody. Buddy Hill's super inconsistent. Al Horford can't walk up the court. Draymond Green just went 0 for 7 his last game at the 3-point line. I don't know why Draymond's taking 7 3-pointers, by the way. But yeah, this is just it's a bad team. And so I think they're a playing team. I think we said it last episode. Curry got to come quicker, and there has to be another trade. It has to, because they want to win. They're not just going to take a step back and be like, oh, no, we traded for Jimmy, but it's fine. No, they want to win a championship, especially with Curry. You don't know how long you have Curry.
Yeah, they're currently 7th in defensive rating, and then they're 22nd in offensive rating. So the offensive part of the game is where they have to just be better. And some of those guys, like you mentioned, haven't played as well or haven't played up to their standards, right? Like Buddy Hield was a guy where he was a hero last year for the Warriors, right? Because he had that huge Game 7 against the Rockets to send them home. And if you look at his numbers this year, right, he's just it's just not there, right? He's shooting 31% from 3, 41% from the field, right? Where, you look at his numbers last year, he was at 37% from 3, and some of that was he started the year off averaging like over 20 a game off the bench. Then he kind of gradually cooled off, but then got better. And then, like I said, had the great Game 7 against Houston. So it's just the question is, who do you go after, right? Because I know we talked about Sabonis in the last episode, but I don't necessarily know if they're going to go after like a max contract big man, right? Like it just seems like for the most part they don't really put but so much value at the center spot, right? Because outside of Draymond, it's Horford and Quentin Post, right? And Post has been better than Horford so far this season, which is good for Post, right? But not necessarily ideal for the team because you signed Horford to be, I thought going into the season, their starting center, right? But, they've kind of load managed him, which is fine. And he plays minutes. But, you look at his numbers and, they've not necessarily worked out so far. He's also been hurt, so that hasn't helped either, right? But he's shooting 32% from 3, 34% from the field, right? 6 points, 4 boards, in about 22 minutes a game. And he's actually a negative in terms of, plus minus for them. And I know and understand that plus minus isn't necessarily always indicative of how well a player's playing, but when you watch him out there, it just hasn't worked. And so I do kind of wonder, does that kind of put more pressure on them to go after a center? But I almost wonder if maybe they just turn Kuminga into like another type of wing, but just one that makes more sense for what they want, right? Like everybody's mentioned Trey Jones and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, but then the problem is everybody wants those guys. Do they have do they have more assets or enough assets to go after those type of players? Do they want to give up all their picks? Because we know and understand that Lakeup, right, in terms of ownership, it doesn't really seem like he really wants to do everything he can, to kind of put together a winning team, right? I think he's kind of already looking past, that this era of Warriors basketball, right? And you can make the argument of whether or not it's the right decision. I don't think it is, but the thing is for him, he's looking at it as we're probably not winning a championship, so why am I going to put all these assets on the table, just so that way we could be somewhat better. But you just never know, because sometimes you could make a deep run and potentially just be in the finals with a chance to win. I don't really see it with this group, just because I think winning 4 rounds is really difficult, and that's kind of been reserved for most of the best teams that don't have to necessarily be in the play-in, right? I think even with the tough schedule and the older roster, we still expected them to be better than this, right? I took the over. The over-under wasn't that high. It was like 46 or so. So I think they won 48 games last year. So basically, could they do somewhat similar as to what they did last year, but maybe just get off to a better start? And it seems like they're just kind of probably headed for potential plan. The only thing that's saving them is if you look below them, right? Some of the teams below them are teams that have been significantly worse than expected, right? The Clippers being amongst one of the main culprits, right? They're 5-15. So the thing is, there's only but so low of a floor they can go to. And even if you look at games back, right, in terms of losses, they're still right there, right? Like the Phoenix Suns have 1 less loss than Golden State. They're 7. Minnesota's at 8 losses. So they could still catch up. It's not like it's necessarily over. And I think they could probably overtake Phoenix just because Phoenix's schedule is starting to get a little bit tougher. They're also injured as well. But you don't want to be in that position where now you have to chase wins and hope and pray that some of these teams can kind of fall behind you. You want to just be able to just look at all the teams up at the top, right? Look at OKC, look at the Lakers, look at Houston, look at Denver, even San Antonio. You want to be there where you've already banked in a bunch of wins early on, right? Even the Spurs without Wemby are getting a bunch of wins, right? So you want to be in that spot so that way you can just be good enough and talented enough to win enough games to be in the top 6, avoid the play-in, and get, potentially a more favorable matchup, right? We don't know what the final matchup will be, but obviously you don't want to be in the play-in with the chance to potentially have to play OKC in the first round if you lose and you're the 8th seed and you win the second game. So we'll see where they're at. This is always a team that I think we kind of looked at more so as a playoff team anyways. I just think the hope was you're good enough that you shouldn't have to be in the play-in, right? Like something went wrong if through the first quarter of the season you're just kind of playing 500 basketball. So I think they can and will be better. It's just what is the actual ceiling? I don't think it's as high with this group, which we already knew. It's going to have to be some other reinforcements coming in. I just don't know who they're going to be because I don't think there's an obvious Kuminga trade, right? Like if you go on Spot Track and set up the trade machine, we did it in the summer. It's not the easiest thing to do. And, we named some names and some type of players they could go after, but we'll see where they're at, by the time we get to January, February, because that's ultimately kind of what matters for them more so anyways, right? April, May, June.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on as we kind of go across some of these other cup games, right? Because that actually was a cup game. I guess we could also talk about on the flip side, right? The Rockets, right? Where they were able to win, a couple of games while Durant was out. Obviously, the Suns, not necessarily great, but like you beat a relatively healthy, well, I mean, Steph got hurt at the end, but you did beat a Warriors team that was healthier than you without Kevin Durant. And, Reed Shepherd all of a sudden has come alive, right, in a lot of these games, right, where now he's been starting and he's actually been playing a huge role. And you watch him out there, right? I mean, this is basically, as we kind of said, like his first real taste of NBA basketball, right? He played 52 games last year, but only 13 minutes and spent a lot of time in the G League. Now you look at his stats so far in the season: 14 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 49 from the field, 45 from 3. In terms of his 2-point percentage, over 50%. So, we'll see where that is, but just miles and miles ahead of where he was last year and kind of filling in, nicely in terms of the Fred VanVleet role, right? More so offensively, but just in general, he looks so much more comfortable out there, and that's going to help Houston in terms of getting them to where they need to go. Because if he can actually be good for them, then that can help boost some of their offense, late in these games and in the playoffs, because they were turning to him a lot at the end of that game, right? Where he's just kind of catching fire, getting to these spots. It's not even necessarily just burning them from 3, because he only shot 4 for 12 from 3 in that game, but he still shot 12 of 25, because if you saw him in the mid-range, right, and if you saw him from that close range area, just pulling up over defenders, he looked like one of the best young players on the floor, right? And that's kind of where you want to be at, right? For the number 3 pick who had high expectations going into last season, but now, he looks good, and, Houston's now, Durant's come back, and they've been able to kind of just hold on and just, win all these games. We talked about them against Denver, where it looks a little bit different against some of the best teams. But as we've already said, they're where you want to be at, right? In terms of they're winning games. By and large, if you look at their net rating, they're beating teams relatively handily when they play them. And right now, as we're recording, they're 13-4, third in the Western Conference. And that's where you want to be, ideally. Like, you want to be, a top 3 seed. We know that there are upsets. We saw them last year, but just in terms of where you would like to be, if you want to make a deep run, and just in terms of the personnel and the process, that's also great too, right? Because you need a really good version of Reed Shepherd, assuming they're not trading him, which I don't think they will. You need a really good version of him. You saw the progressions from Şengün. You've seen the progressions from a lot of these younger guys, right? Thompson looks a little bit uncomfortable at times, but just in general, like, without Durant, that was kind of a huge game for them, right? Because it doesn't seem like it on the surface, but just they lost to that team last year in the playoffs, right? And Durant wasn't there, to kind of help potentially save them or bail them out. And so that was kind of if you're Houston, a really cool moment. It is the regular season, but just the fact that you went into Golden State on the road and you were able to have a come from behind win because they were down double digits at halftime and they were able to pull out a crunch time win. That may not have been something they could have done last year. I know they had that one cup win against Golden State, I think, where it was like, it was like Jalen Green got fouled at the end, right? And he hit those shots at the line to give him the win. But this was like one where the process in the fourth quarter was really impressive because they basically took out Golden State's offense in the second half. And, even with the smaller lineup, because there was no Adams, no Durant, no Eason, no Dorian Finney-Smith. They were still able to impose their will and physicality on the team, and then even on the offensive end, like I said, there were bright spots.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is one of the one of the premier teams to watch in the league, right? A lot of people didn't necessarily pick them to win the title, but a lot of people do have high expectations, obviously, with a superstar like KD coming into the fold. But yeah, shout out to Reed for sure. I think his development this season has been, very, very accelerated, right? Because if you look at, his first game, he was getting targeted on pretty much both ends of the floor by the Thunder, right?
Yes.
And now to see him, be inserted into the starting lineup, here and there while looking very comfortable, right? That's great. But I feel like I need to see more of this team,
Mhm.
right? Granted, it's a decent sample size of games that we've seen so far, but I want to see them play some bump. I want to see them play competition, right? They're doing all the right things in terms of beating teams that they should be beating, but I want to see them, get an upset here and there. I want to see them take on the Thunder again. I want to see them take on the Nuggets because those are teams that you're going to have to play to get to that title if that's the end goal, which it obviously is. But shout out to every young player on that team. I think the development over there has been amazing, right? You have Jabari Smith Jr., who's been leaning on KD, learning, how to spot up, how to be efficient, right? Shingun, we already know that combo of him and Durant obviously opens up the floor and, is just you have vast opportunities to do pretty much whatever you want on the offensive end, right? I think Amen, he's been good, but I think we can see more from him, right? We already know that he's a top, 99 percentile, athlete, whatever. Cool. That's great. But I need to see more from him in terms of decision making. But hopefully Reed, being as good as he can possibly be, I think that takes pressure off of Amen and makes the team a whole lot better.
I got a question for you guys, right?
What's up?
If Reed Shepard is playing in last year's playoffs, replacing Jalen Green, mind you, Jalen Green had one good game. Do they come out with the series win?
No.
Okay.
Reed still gets
Based
targeted
off of what he was
defensively.
doing last year. Yeah, based off of what he was doing last year as a rookie, then I would say no, because like, Yarby mentioned, I think defense would be a problem. And I don't know if offensively, because Golden State's defense was really good last year as well. And I don't necessarily know if that would have been a great matchup for him because they do, they didn't necessarily have a ton of quote unquote POA guys, but they did have guys that could kind of swarm around and play fast and be physical and make that tough on him. I think, the time in the G League in the summer that he's been able to put in the work, and then also just the progression over this season, I think has helped prepare him for this moment. Maybe if you had this version of Reed Shepard last year, right? Maybe, but I don't think he would have gotten that necessarily, right? Even though we kind of expected him to be ready right out of the gate, I don't think he was.
And then, I'm talking about specifically this season. If he did it last year, but I think this is the most improved. This is why they make this most improved award. I'm not saying he's gonna go win it, but I'm tired of people that win the most improved award that been in the league for 5 years, and they be like, "Oh, we just seen a leap from him because he had 5 extra points." But when you look at Reed Shepard, he played 52 games last year, right, and averaged 4 points a game. But this year, you automatically see the leap of averaging 14 points a game, shooting 49% from the field, which last year he shot 35. The year before, right, he shot 34% from the 3-point line. You shoot 45. So that's what I call most improved. I think that award is so flawed. But good for Reed Shepard, right? I remember Yarby and I was kind of not bashing him, but he was just doing stuff out there. He was just out there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. He was not good in that first game.
Yeah, he wasn't. So I'm glad for him, right? Like he was a top lottery pick, and it's working out so far, and good for them. They desperately needed the point guard play without your best guard and Fred VanVleet, right? So this is only gonna make him a better player, but it's only gonna help out this Houston Rockets now and for the next couple of years. So I like it. They still need to beat the top dogs because that's the end of the day. That's their goal, and they still need they're trying to win a championship. You acquire a player like Durant. You're not worried about a first round exit. It's either Western Conference Finals or that's the lowest you want to go. So good for this team. Keep racking up those victories. And when the hell is Dorian Finney-Smith gonna come back, man?
We don't know. We don't
know what I mean? Like this signing, like I was big on that signing because I know what he can bring to the team,
right?
And I know like he can play a certain role that they're gonna need in the postseason, and maybe he does. But don't be surprised if we get like a notification from Shams that Dorian Finney-Smith is having season-ending surgery because over something. Don't be surprised. There's no update. Maybe there is.
Well, it's funny, right? Because in the offseason, right, that, there were multiple people who kind of sourced this, right? It was like Zach Lowe, I think a couple of Lakers people as well, Anthony Irwin and others, and they kind of mentioned that what had kind of happened seemingly, right, was that I think it was Pelinka, right? He was kind of leaking to other teams this idea of that Dorian Finney-Smith's ankle was a real problem to try to, I think, kind of scare teams away from signing him. And then I think his camp got word of it, and then that's kind of ended the relationship where that's when he ended up going to Houston. But I guess that means that, okay, well, his ankle clearly was messed up because he had that issue. I think he had said last year when he was in LA, actually, but even before he was in LA, he was in Brooklyn playing through an ankle injury. So I don't think there's been any update in terms of when he comes back. So the expectation I would say is I wouldn't expect to see him until probably January at the earliest, right? Like by the time he comes back, you'll probably have almost forgotten, like, oh yeah, this guy's been out for pretty much the whole season. So I don't think there's been any update on it. Good news is they're not in a position where they desperately need him to win these games, right? Like the moment if you're Houston, you're saying, well, we're losing these games because we don't have Dorian Finney-Smith, that's a problem, right? Even if you're like, say, a team like Golden State, right, where Melton hasn't played, right, and he's supposed to be back soon, right? But it's not necessarily a fair expectation to him to say, all right, well, once he comes back, we can get things rolling, right? When you're kind of desperately relying on a role player, that's an issue. And that's the nice thing with Houston is they do have a ton of depth so that way when he comes back, they can ease him back into the rotation. And, like you mentioned, there's going to be moments in the playoffs where you may not be able to play the two bigs together, but you could still go small and still be big because all these guys are wing-sized players other than Reed Shepherd, right? That's kind of the value of having those guys. And he can shoot, right? And they're going to need three-point shooting in some spots in the playoffs. So hopefully he comes back sooner than later. I just don't know when. I don't think anybody has an update as of right now.
Right.
Yeah, so I just kind of looked in terms of, you mentioned most improved. So betting favorite right now to win is Jalen Duren. Then it's Josh Giddey. Then it's Denny Avdia. Then Ryan Rollins. So those are the four,
So
favorites right now.
like Chris, like let's be okay. I'm fine with Duran, right? I'm completely fine with that. That's he has been amazing. Ryan Rollins is an example of why they made most improved. No one knew who the hell Ryan Rollins is unless you watched him, and
Yeah, right.
even in you know what I mean. So like this award used to be fixed and it's so flawed, but that's a whole other conversation. But I'm fine with Duran there. Denny Avdia is having an amazing season. Don't get me wrong, he should be an all-star this season. But wasn't he good? I swear Denny Avdia had a great season last year. Probably not as good as this year, but you know what I mean? Like I don't know.
17 a game.
It was the
So,
beginning of the breakout last year, but he's broken out this year. But I don't think he should get MIP. Like you said, I think it should go to Ryan Rollins. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, I agree.
He became a non-existent player to a player that is closing games and it's getting buckets. I mean, even Giannis said, "Yeah, I'd never seen this before. I've been in the league forever." He made a comment about it. He's like, "Bro, I've been in the league forever. I haven't seen this in a while."
Yeah.
So
he was literally a throwaway piece, like in a trade, and now he's become an elite rotational guy, or an elite starter. Yeah. Not even rotational at this point.
Yeah, like they need him,
literally.
And that's always kind of the funny thing in terms of the conversation about most improved, right? Because I think it was Ja that won it one of those years, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? And then the conversation was like, okay, should we give it to a guy who was good but has taken the leap to like potential superstar versus like a guy who wasn't very good and now he is good, right? So like there's different levels to it. And it depends. Like Ryan Rollins, the numbers plus the narrative is so great. I feel like that one's so hard to top, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he didn't get it, right? But like you said, it's a flawed award. The clutch one is kind of a funky one too because it's just kind of hard to figure out. Okay, how do you really determine like who the most clutch player in the league is, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, there's a guy that might put up big numbers in like every close game, but does that really mean that they're the most clutch player, because their team is like in a bunch of close games? Because there's other players where it's like, okay, look at SGA or look at Jokic where, in terms of SGA, they were in very few close games last year, right? But, no one really make the argument as to whether or not he's a big time crunch time player. So I don't know. That one's a tough one for me to figure out too, because we do the awards predictions before the season and we do it for all of them. But for some of them, it's just like, we'll see what happens because a couple of them are tricky to figure out. honestly. So,
Yeah.
so now we're kind of moving on into some other cup games, right? So, I guess we might as well talk about this one, right? So, Jalen Williams came back for Oklahoma City against the Phoenix Suns, right? Who've actually been very competitive so far this season, right? But obviously, Williams came back. Numbers not necessarily striking. This was a super competitive game where Phoenix actually had an opportunity to win this game against Oklahoma City, right? And they couldn't close it out, right? OKC has been very tough all year. Only one team has beaten them, right? The Portland Trailblazers. But now Williams is back, and a team that basically has only lost one game all season is going to be even better, right? They're 20-1. And now Williams is back, and he'll only get better and better from here on out, right? Because he missed so much time, he won't unfortunately get the raise or whatever for being all NBA. That sucks for him. But obviously it's a huge addition to their team because he's their second best player. Now everybody can kind of be slotted in, even in roles that are even more beneficial for them. I know Hardenstein's out, so now it's going to probably just be going back to one big on the floor for a while, or if it's double bigs, it's not quite the same. But doesn't really matter, right? They have so much depth. They're going to find ways to win. But what do you all think about the return, right? Because we don't have to spend a ton of time on it because we know how good he is.
Yeah.
But just, what are your expectations, in terms of what you would like to see from him going forward? Since he's obviously going to be starting the season from behind, having to play catch up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Here's what I'll say about it, right? The return itself, I mean, it was kind of what, you expect from a player who's, coming back from an injury, right? You expect him to kind of ramp up. You don't expect anything crazy, right? But I think Chet has set the bar in terms of what we should expect from J-Dub's development, right? Because Chet has been a freaking godsend for this team, right? He was already great last year, but this year he's even better. The efficiency is crazy. Defense, we already know, right? So I think J-Dub is going to probably have to, match that energy, right? And be even better than he was last year. So, and I think that was to be expected because they're so young and, they have, a great future ahead of them and the team is already overpowered as is, right? So, I expect him to eventually get back to the J-Dub that we know. But in this game, I mean, the efficiency was rough. Defensively, he was there, right? So nothing to really complain about, especially in a game where, I'm not going to say they don't need him, but, they've played almost like 20 games without J-Dub.
Right.
So, and they've won, I think they've won all but one of them. So, nothing too crazy here, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems just not fair. I mean, it's just not fair. I mean, like, they're just too good, right? Like, they just have fun. They take work. Their work is just goofing off and beating everybody, right? Like, I mean, you got Shea, who's just amazing still, right? Chet's having a really good season, but like when you look at their third leading scorer is AJ Mitchell. I don't even think Mitchell was in their rotation last year. Could
Oh,
be
really?
wrong, but I don't think. Yeah, he
Yeah,
was.
he kind of was. Then he got hurt. That's what happened. And then he stopped playing and then didn't come back until like the finals.
So like the fact that he's their leading scorer, then Aaron Wiggins, right, has only played 9 games this year. 9. He's injured, averaging 15. Joe played 15, but his minutes they were down and then they went back up. So like this team is just so deep. All they really got to do is like Isaiah Hartenstein's injured. Oh, okay, well they got the other Jay Williams who is just a morale player who's just gonna come in, play his minutes, set a screen, hit a three, get the crowd going, and bam. Like I mean, it's really just they're just a very good team. And then they got the best defenders in the world. I mean, when you have Jason Wallace, you have Lou Dort, you got Alex Caruso, you got Chet Holmgren. I mean, even Isaiah Hartenstein protecting the rim. I mean, this team is just so good. Like Jalen Williams. I mean, they have everything you need to do to win the championship. And so far, it looks like they're going to be repeating. So I have really nothing bad to say about this team at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the wild part where this was kind of the argument. The main argument against Oklahoma City going into the season is it's hard to win back to back. It's really difficult to make a basketball argument for why OKC shouldn't go back to back. I mean, you can make a case that there are some teams that could match up well with them, but it's just they're young. Their young guys are only going to get better. They're not even really an apron team, so they still have a ton of flexibility to do whatever they want. Then, of course, because of the Clippers situation, then they might have a situation where maybe they win the championship this year. Then they get a top 3 pick that can just come into the roster and just basically fill in the role of somebody else who comes in. So it's just kind of wild to just watch them every night. And with SGA, I mean, even he's even been better this season, right? I mean, not only is he still averaging his customary over 30 a game, 32 and a half a game, he's shooting over 40% from three on 5 attempts a game, right? Last year he was at 37.5. Now he's at 41. He can even hit threes off pull-up shots, right? Because he did that to end the game against the Suns the other night, right? Where he was basically able to just above the break, just hit a step back three off the dribble. And it's awesome to see. And it's kind of funny, right? Because very few people picked SGA to win MVP this season, right? Most of the other names. I mean, I think Jokic was the favorite, but people brought up other names as well. Most people kind of acknowledged it was probably a two-man race. But really, honestly, like with SGA, if they get to 70 wins, then he's probably going to win it, right? Because it's going to be pretty hard. Yeah, like he's going to have to win it
He's
because it's
better
going to
than
be
last
really
year.
hard. Yeah, because he's already better than last year. And if they win 70 games and he's played every game, it's pretty hard to make the case for someone else. I mean, of course, yeah, we know net rating wise, even when he's off the floor, they're still elite. But it doesn't matter, right? Like at the end of the day, like if you're gonna get that many wins and he's gonna play that well, it's not really much you can do. And if you look at some of the other guys this season, right? Like obviously Jokic is playing at a high level, right? Giannis before he got hurt, after coming back, playing great, right? Luka, same thing, right? It's like it's just not fair, right? Just because you're in a situation where this team is probably, like I said, gonna top more games than they did last year, assuming they're relatively healthy. And these guys are playing at an all-time elite level, and it doesn't matter because, like you said, it's just defensively, it's very hard to really be able to kind of best this team, especially in the regular season, right? They looked more vulnerable in the playoffs last year, but what if that's not the case this season, right? Like, last year they were one of the better three-point shooting teams, and then in the playoffs couldn't hit threes at all. Like all their better three-point shooters, like Isaiah Joe, just out of the rotation. You can't hit threes, you're gone, right? But even he looks better, right? Like defensively, now he's a guy where you can put him out there and you can feel good about it. And I know, like, it's always hard to kind of spend but so much time talking about OKC because everybody knows how great they are. But at the same time, you still have to acknowledge how great they've been playing and why they look as good as they've looked, and why there's such a strong case for them to go back to back. I know we've said it kind of every year at this point, but this really does feel like the team that could potentially do it, because Boston could have had a good chance last year. They did have some older guys who took a step back, but then obviously it didn't work out. So we'll see if it works out for Oklahoma City. But this team is loaded right now, and it's just kind of crazy to watch their progression in real time. Because I remember when a couple seasons ago when they were a play-in team, right, and they were kind of the new team where everybody was like, oh, we want them to win, we want them to be the 8th seed and play against whoever the 1 seed was at the time. I think it was Denver, and now they're the 1 seed, basically beating everybody. So it's kind of cool to see, I think, in real time. And then I guess if we want to talk about Phoenix at all, because we really haven't mentioned them a whole
Let
lot
me.
this season. I
Yeah,
mean, they've been really good as well. Now, unfortunately, they've lost a couple of games recently. They have kind of gotten into a trickier part of their schedule. But you just kind of look at some of the names on this roster and just compare it to last year's roster where they had the big three. And now all of a sudden, it's kind of just more so some guys that are role players. It's still kind of impressive, just the fact that they have been much better, I think, than expected to go into the season. Yarby and I picked the over on this team because we did like the offseason and we liked the additions that they made, but it was still hard to make a really good case. Could they get anywhere close to 36, 37, 38 wins? Because the Western Conference is tough, but with the way all these guys are contributing, Booker has been kind of off the last few games, but by and large, he's been great this season. Even Mark Williams, right, who was not traded for last year because of his health issues, he's been productive. Dylan Brooks, Grayson Allen had a 40-point game. Jordan Goodwin, who was basically just kind of waived by the Lakers. I mean, all these guys are doing their job, especially on the defensive end, and it's just night and day compared to what it was last season when they could not get stops to save their lives, right? Like, I think defensive rating wise, they're 13, which doesn't sound crazy, but that's still above average on the defensive end, right? Offensively, they are 12th. So right now they're like a slightly above average team, and I think that will probably change. But what do you all think about the Phoenix Suns so far based off of what you've seen? Because they're kind of an underrated story just based off of, like, last season, expectations were high, did not meet them at all. Now a bunch of those guys have, been moved on from, and, the one that I guess hasn't had a happy ending story so far is Beal. But just in general, what do we think of the Phoenix Suns so far this season? Because I think there's a lot to like in terms of the pieces, and there are pieces that we haven't seen yet, right? Because Jalen Green's only played 1 game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with Book, right? Like, his resurgence and, him being kind of back into the fold and back in certain conversations is great. And like I said, it starts with him. But you also have to shout out Dylan Brooks. I know he's averaging around 20 something per game on some kind of wonky efficiency, but he brings a certain mentality that to this team that I think they haven't really had in the past, right? Their defense is definitely um, a focal point, right? So you surrounded Book with some solid, serviceable defenders that, and they play good team defense. That's the thing that I like about the roster, right? So I think that's the thing that's kind of holding them up alongside, the fact that, Book is so great offensively. But as long as they can kind of, be at the top end of the play in, or even potentially make it out, I think that's a great season for them. But, it is wild that they've been doing all this pretty much without arguably their second best player on paper, Jalen Green.
Yeah, I mean, to start the year, they're 11th in what offensive rating, I believe in defensive rating. They're 14th. I mean, that's average, right? That's what you can. You're not asking for much, right? This team had low expectations coming in, but I think it's mainly because Booker doesn't have to deal with no more toxic stuff, right? No more Kevin Durant, no more Bradley Beal, even DeAndre Ayton situation back when they were playing together, right? None of that. You had, and then also had to play with Yusuf Nurkic, I think the worst center in the league. So I mean, he had to deal with all that stuff, right? Now Devin Booker's at peace, man. I mean, he's playing like Devin Booker, the Devin Booker that we all know, right? I mean, a year ago, I'm just looking at Book. I'm like, dude, like I consider you one of the top 3 guards. I don't even know if you're that.
Yeah.
But this year, he's going back to what we all know, getting buckets. And honestly, I think Dylan Brooks. I think everywhere he goes, I'll be honest with you, man. They win games, and he brings this type of culture. I mean, look at that Memphis team, right? That Memphis team will never be the same. Well, they haven't been the same since he left. And I mean, Dylan Brooks, I'm looking at his bag where you can tell him and Booker been in the lab together. I'm seeing moves I ain't never see Dylan Brooks pull out his life,
Yeah, bro.
and he's
Spin
doing it,
jumpers.
man. Yeah, I mean, he's hooping for real. I mean, you got to give it to him, right? Averaging 21 points a game. I mean, this is impressive. I mean, they have they have 7, 8 players in double digits this year, and also Grayson Allen, man. I mean, he was at a stretch where he was on a heater. He has been awesome, right? He's averaging 18 this year. It'd be interesting to see how Jalen Green, fits in with this team because they only played 2 games, so I think it'll take a little bit longer. But I like what they did during the draft, like what they did during the offseason. And I think they'll be like one of those fun teams that you probably just don't want to see in the play-in or just in the playoff matchups if they do make it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right? Just in terms of Brooks, in terms of post Memphis, how it's gone, right? Because obviously we exited that Memphis series against the Lakers, right, where they were just leaving him open. He couldn't knock down anything, and pretty much got most of the blame for how that series went. I remember we were laughing about it when it happened, right? Because it was reporting about, uh, oh yeah, the Grizzlies under no circumstances will bring back Dylan Brooks, and it's like that's something you never hear after a series has ended and we're not even in the off season yet, right? It was like right after they got eliminated, right? And really since then, as Top Notch mentioned, he's kind of turned it around and has actually been like a focal point, kind of a leader for the teams he's been on, right? Houston grabbed him and brought him in to be kind of a culture setter for their team to kind of turn them into more of a tough, rugged, physical team. And he was super productive for them as well, right? And, now in Phoenix, he's averaging over 20 a game. The 3-point shooting has gone down for Phoenix in the last few games, like even Booker, right? He was starting the season over 40% from three. Now it's down to 31. I think that'll change once they get more of their guys to come back. But, this team, it is kind of funny how now they're actually kind of a fun team to watch. Where, last year, other than the first stretch, first month of the season or so, they were kind of a rough watch. And it got to a point where eventually those guys clearly just kind of gave up and just started kind of just just kind of they knew that the season was over, so I don't think they were necessarily giving their best effort. Like I said, other than Beal, guess I'm kind of glad that it's worked out for everyone involved so far, right? Like Booker's back, Durant, is in Houston in a better situation for himself. But it is just kind of weird how that all went down. And even, Colin Gillespie, right? That's kind of the guy that everybody kind of started pointing out last year, like, hey, this guy's an okay, decent point guard. And now all of a sudden, he's kind of had a big year for them, right? Where they didn't really have any point guards on the roster last year other than Tyus Jones, who just didn't really work out for Phoenix a whole lot. And so it's kind of cool to see just the resurgence, like you guys mentioned, of Booker and Brooks, along with some of these other pieces as well. What do you think of the Mark Williams addition, right? Because that was kind of one where we knew that he was a solid player. It's just a matter of could he actually be healthy and productive. But what do you all think of how he's played this year, just in terms of his, impact on the team?
Solid. I mean, we all knew that this guy, when healthy, could be, a double double machine, and that's pretty much, what he's been. He's been in the vicinity of that, right? He's averaging like like 12-9 or something like that. So, nothing too crazy, nothing really unexpected. And he's been on the floor, for what 17 games. So shout out to him so far.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing his role, doing what he has to do. He's on a fun team. I like their bigs, especially I think Moloch. When he does get crack the rotation a little bit more, obviously more minutes, I think he's going to be fun too. But they have Nick Richards, they got Mark Williams, they got a lot of bigs over there. So good for him.
Yeah. So now I guess we might as well shift over to the Eastern Conference a little bit just to kind of see, what's been going on over there because we did have some big games over the weekend in the Eastern Conference, right? Where I guess we could mention the Knicks and the Bucks, right? Where like the Knicks, right? They've kind of been a team that was our team to come out of the Eastern Conference and represent them in the finals, and they had kind of gotten off to kind of an up and down stretch so far this season, right? The defense hasn't really been there, but they have now they've now been 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 4 in a row. They've climbed back up to the 2 spot in the Eastern Conference, right? And what do we think of the Knicks so far? Because I mean, obviously Anunoby's been out, so that's kind of changed some stuff. But they have ran the double bigs, right? Which was something that was not really explored for most of last season until almost the end, and that was something we were kind of wondering if they would do that at the beginning of last season, right? And then in terms of the bench, right? It's Clarkson, it's Yabusele, I guess Josh Hart when he doesn't start when guys are out, he's there as well. But like I said, the offense, they're one of the best offensive teams. They shoot a ton of threes, and it does feel like you do see a lot more ball movement. But just the kind of the reoccurring theme I feel like for a lot of these Eastern Conference teams is I don't really know how impressed I really am by these teams so far. But it's good to see that I think they are 7-3 in their last 10. They look better, I think, than they had been like a week or two ago. So what do you guys think?
I'm very impressed with what the Knicks have been able
Yeah,
to accomplish thus far, and specifically Jalen Brunson because he is the Knicks,
there we
right?
go.
Like that's the career year that he's having, right? It's showing. Offensively, right? We all know, what they can bring to the table. I think defensively, there are going to be probably some woes just because of Mike Brown, the coaching style, and things like that, right? You've lost a little bit of the, I guess, grit and toughness that the Knicks had last year, but Anunoby being in and out of the lineup does not help. But offensively, I love what I'm seeing. I
Right.
need more from Cat, in my opinion. I think he's woken up
Mhm.
slightly, but in the Bucks game specifically, yeah, I was not really
Yeah,
impressed. But shout out to
right.
Brunson.
Yeah.
We already know what he's able to do inside out the clutch. It doesn't really matter. Pretty much all 4 quarters, you know what you're getting with JB. And like I said, he's having a career year. And I think he's really
Yeah.
one of the more slept on players in the league right now. Don't really hear a lot of people talking about him, even though he is in the biggest market or one of the biggest markets in the league. But yeah, to be averaging 29 and doing the stuff that he's doing on the efficiency, it's kind of
Yeah.
wild, with the volume. And it's funny because when Mike Brown was hired, like people thought, okay, well, yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit less, Brunson ball and more ball movement, which there has been. But still, I think, the switchability of this team, and this is why I picked them to win the title last year, was because of the fact that, yeah, right, like you bring in a guy like Cat, automatically, the pick and roll between Jalen Brunson should be, flawless. And we already know that JB can run
Mhm.
ISO as well. So shout out to the Knicks. And I think they're finally figuring it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Honestly, when it comes to the Knicks, I don't judge their regular season. I understand they got a new coach, they got a new rotation and stuff like that. But to me matters is what they do in the postseason because I think their 2 best players are players that get attacked on the defensive end. Not as much as Cat. I'm not as much for Brunson, but Carthy Towns gets attacked. And when your players are getting attacked defensively, I think that's a huge problem. They do it to Tyler Hero with Miami. And so these are the type of players you need on the court. So I'm not too big on this Knicks team because the Miami Heat will take them down. It's really just simple as that. We're the better team. We have better depth. We have the better coach. We're just overall better. We already seen what we did to them. I'm not worried about no Jordan Clarkson coming off their bench who's gonna take 15 bad shots in the clutch and they can't play defense. Yabusele's barely cracking the rotation. Yeah, they got Cat. Yeah, they got Brunson. Tough players to stop. Don't get me wrong, especially Brunson with all his foul baiting and all that good stuff. But I think when playoffs matter, they have a lot of players that can be unplayable and not the greatest defenders. Mikhail and OG will be there in their starting lineup, and of course Josh Hart. But I'm just not as high on them because I see them getting taken down. But I could be totally wrong, right? We're all wrong with our takes, but good for them that they can maintain number 2 seed. Just know you get matched up with us in that 4 or 5 seed, we're eliminating y'all in that first round. You don't want to drop to 5.
And that's kind of the thing with the Knicks, right? In terms of like they had a stretch where they started off slow, but then if you look at them in their more recent games, right, like back to back, pretty decisive wins against, I mean, the Bucks have not played great. Giannis was out for a while, but like the Raptors, that was a team that was playing really well so far this season, and the Knicks pretty much handled them. You're right. RJ Barrett didn't play, but like you mentioned, like just the fact that you have some go-to guys on the offensive end, and now they have more versatility on the offensive end, like Mikal Bridges, right? That was a guy where last year Knicks fans couldn't really figure out whether or not they really liked him or whether or not they really hated him because of all the stuff they gave up. But you look at him this year, right? Like, yeah, the counting stats in terms of points per game, all right, so what? That's lower, but look at the shots he's getting, right? Look at the fact that now he's shooting over 40%, from the 3-point line, right? Like that's something that you got to feel really good about, right? Like you mentioned, Towns has kind of had to find his way a little bit offensively, but when you look at their two bigs together, like Mitchell Robinson, when he's out there with Towns, that's basically their best lineup, right? And that's kind of what we were super excited about, where it's like, all right, Towns, like he was in Minnesota, can space the floor, and yeah, he can guard some of the other big guys, and then you can have Robinson roaming around the paint. And then, of course, even for Mitchell Robinson, even though he's not really a scorer, all the offensive rebounds, all the extra opportunities he can generate, right? If you watch some of these other teams, like remember Golden State was famous for that, where it's like you have to get the boards because if they get the offensive rebound and kick it back out to their shooters, it's basically an automatic basket where you pretty much have to get back on the offensive end. So that's where, like I said, I think based off of what we saw earlier in the season compared to what we're seeing now, like I think that they are really progressing in terms of what we're seeing. And that's kind of what you want, right? Like you knew it would take a little bit of time, even though it was mostly the same roster because it's a different coach. But I do think they are getting their act together now. And it's just a matter of one of the reasons I think also why we picked them in the playoffs is just when you look at them in the playoffs compared to the regular season, that's where they shine, right? Because a lot of those series that they won were kind of series where they weren't necessarily expected to win. Some of them were upsets, right? Like nobody was picking them against the Celtics last year, right? I mean, you did because you
Except
picked
me.
them to win the title.
I was
Right?
literally
But just
forced to.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like just in general, right? Like they were massive underdogs, and we know what happened in the Celtics series in terms of some of the injuries, but still, right? Like last season, they got to the conference finals. Now you build on it, and it was for the best, right? That they didn't necessarily make some crazy trade where they're like, let's break it up, let's blow it up, because we lost to the Pacers again, right? Like, well, now you don't have to deal with the Pacers again this year, so we'll see where they're at once we get to the playoffs. But like I said, this is a team where come playoff time, they know how to play, that Brunson ball style of offense where you will probably need that at
Oh
times
yeah.
late in games in the playoffs where you're going to have to turn to your go-to offensive guys, right? We know he can do it because we've seen him do it before, but just having more options, so that's not the only thing you have to do. That's what you want because you want to get the best out of all these other guys because Anunoby was playing some of the best basketball of his career right before he got hurt, right? Like where you watched how involved he was in the offense. I mean, he was playing great, right? 40% from three, 16 a game, 6 rebounds. So a lot to like. I just wish the Yabusele signing seemed like it would be a little bit better, but it just hasn't worked necessarily as well as you would have wanted. But the main thing is you still have Hart when you're healthy off the bench. McBride, could you get one more guy? Could you get Clarkson to be okay? I don't know how much flexibility they're going to have at the deadline, but just in general, I do like what I've seen thus far from them. I think there's some real progress for them, and it's the process, right, that matters. So, and they're getting results as well because they're winning.
Yeah.
So, I guess also looking at the Eastern Conference, there's another team that we picked the over on, and I don't know if if they're gonna get it. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers, where last year, right, their starting five was pretty much healthy. I think their four best guys all played 70 plus games, and they won over 60 games. They have had some more injuries this year. Garland's back now. Obviously, Jared Allen's out, but I don't know. They look a little bit different. Maybe I just need to see more games where they're completely healthy. I mean, their bench really hasn't been that great this season, right? Obviously, we know Lonzo can't play every game because he's not been healthy, but none of the other guys off the bench have really been that impressive. They've had some moments, right? Like Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, when he's gotten minutes, he's had some moments, but they're not as deep as they were last year. We'll see what happens when Max Strus comes back. They don't look the same, in terms of the defense. Obviously, when Garland was out, they didn't really have a point guard, right? It was kind of Mitchell just kind of being forced into a score first mentality that last year he didn't have to do because they just had a lot more depth, right? So offensively, they're 14th, and then defensively, they're 9th. So it's looked a little bit better, but it's been so up and down where I just don't necessarily know what to make of this team. I mean, I guess if they're at full strength, they'll still be a formidable opponent. But I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen enough consistency to make me feel like, okay, they'll be better than where they were last year. I don't know what you guys think, but this is a team that's, I don't know, kind of hard to get a read on. And I've been a little bit lower on them as a playoff team anyways, but just in general, I don't know. The Cavs are treading a little bit more down for me, but I would like to see more games when they're at full strength. But we're not going to see it because Allen's been out, but they're 5-5 in their last 10. They've lost 3 in a row. I don't know. I mean, I picked the over. I don't know if they're going to get it.
Yeah, sorry. I might have just seen catch of the year. I'm not gonna lie, on Sunday Night Football, that was a wild catch, one-handed snack. Sorry. Shout out to the Commanders, but um, Cleveland. Yeah, that's where we were. Cleveland. Not too high on this team. I think they're in the fraudulent territory. Absolutely. Garland can't stay healthy, right? Best ability is your availability. Hasn't really been able to play. And when he's been on the court, he's been wildly inefficient. Not good. Donovan Mitchell, on the other hand, shout out to him. He's been having an amazing season, balling. A little bit of a Brunson impression, in my opinion, with the volume, of the shots that he's taking and, the amount of times that the ball is in his hands nightly. It's great, but I don't know. Overall, the bench is just not really what it was last year. I think, other pieces like DeAndre Hunter haven't necessarily, panned out, like you kind of expected, but I don't think they're as, good as they were last year, obviously. They're a little bit more volatile. Granted, there are some injuries here and there, but yeah, I'm not really high on this team anymore. And it kind of sucks because I thought they had a somewhat decent offseason, bringing in like Lonzo Ball instead of, Ty Jerome. So I thought that was a somewhat of an upgrade. I thought he's probably a little bit more versatile, brings a lot on the defensive end, but they've just lost all their mojo. And I think it starts with the health.
I think it does start with help, but I also think it starts with Evan Mobley. I think Evan Mobley has been overwhelmed, whatever the damn word is, hasn't played well. Like,
I feel you, man. I feel you.
yo,
It's all good.
Evan Mobley just hasn't really taken the next leap that we've seen. Like a player like Chet, like you could tell Chet has been
Fair.
dominant. When you look at Mobley, it's like, like his numbers. Like if you just look at his numbers, like, oh, he's doing 19 and 9, but he did that last year, right? So like we need that. You need him to improve. And I also feel like the problem is you need to put Mobley officially at the 5 and move off from Jared Allen. I think that's only going to make Mobley better and more dominant. I just don't like the fit of Mobley and Jared Allen at all together. So, I think now with Jared Allen actually being injured, it might help Mobley out a little bit more, obviously, because he's not going to be there. He can play full-time 5. But, when I think about Donovan Mitchell, like, there's times I feel bad, right? He went to he was on the Utah Jazz team. They had the number 1 seed, got bounced out early, right? On the Cavaliers, had one of their best seasons last year, got bounced out early. I just feel like no matter what team he's on, and no matter how good they are during the regular season, they just never could find a way to win games on any team that he has played for so far. So I think this team is going to be eliminated real early. They're frauds. They ain't going nowhere. They exposed my team pretty bad, but honestly, I would love to see them again this year with my new improved team. I honestly think we sweep them. And he called a hot take or whatever you want. But I ain't worried about no Cavaliers, especially, when they got Darius Garland out there who's a walking cone.
Pretty much, yeah. I agree.
And that's kind of the thing that stinks in terms of the Cavs this year, right? Is like the 2 bigs. I mean, Allen, he's down to 26 minutes a game, right? Still +5 when he's out there. But even with Mobley, like you mentioned, his stats, he's taking more threes and he's still shooting a good percentage, 38% from 3 on 4.5 attempts a game. But it does feel like, honestly, you need Garland because that's the point guard. That's the guy that kind of, makes all the in-between type of possessions work outside of, what Mitchell can do as a scorer, right? Garland can get some of these guys good quality shots that, Mitchell as a scorer could potentially get, but that's not really his game. He's, like I said, he's more of a score first guy. But Garland just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and it's kind of hard to put your faith and belief, into a group where, you can't really trust one of your highest paid players to stay healthy consistently. So this season, I think, is a lot of pressure for them, because if you can't get it done this season in an Eastern Conference where nobody has necessarily completely separated themselves from the pack, like nobody feels like there's an OKC level team in the Eastern Conference, if you can't get it done, you might have to kind of think about maybe moving on from some of these guys. Like, like if they go out early this season again, then like, all right, let's explore maybe Jared Allen. Let's explore, I'm not saying that they're going to have to, but like, I think you have to think about it. Like Allen, Garland, whatever.
I'd rather get rid of Garland, bro. I'm going to be real.
And that's
I love
the
the
question.
guy. Like that's you already know. That's one of my favorite players, but it's like, bro, like you can't stay healthy, you can't defend, and then when you are out there, you're not efficient. So what are you doing? And I don't think it's a good pairing between him and Donovan Mitchell, right? It's not good.
It's just wild, right? Because last year it looked so good. But I'm still gonna wait it out and wait for him to get healthy. He's only played in 7 games. He's not been good in the games he's played, right? He's got, they're minus 0.4 when he's out there. I think in this last game they played against Boston, they only lost by 2, and he was a minus 27 in the minutes he was out there. I know they got completely annihilated and then they came back, but still, he's not been good this season compared to what he was last year. He was like an all-star. Some people were like, that guy's all NBA. So if you can get that version of Garland, and like I said, I think we do have to be fair and give it some time.
Yeah.
Then okay, we'll see where they're at. They're still not as deep, so that would be my concern, right? Because Ty Jerome was able to kind of hold the fort when Garland was out, but obviously, even if you brought him back, I mean, he's not played at all for Memphis this year because he's been hurt, right? And Lonzo's not going to play, but so many games because he's, obviously, had a lot of injury issues himself. So that's the main thing. Is last year they were super deep, so if one guy was out, it didn't really matter. But now they're not as deep, so if you miss one guy, especially a guy like Garland, you're in some real trouble. So maybe they'll figure it out, but so far they've been, to me, underwhelming. And I just want to see what it looks like once these guys potentially get a little bit healthier and kind of get back into it, right? Because if they're fully healthy, I could think that they could still be really good. But I just think because of what happened last year, it's really hard to have but so much belief in that group. But, they did get hurt in the playoffs last year as well. And maybe they'll just never be healthy. But, I think we still have to kind of wait it out and see. But I'm not loving what I'm seeing thus far, right? And I don't. If you're a Cavs fan, you probably feel the same way, right? Like their over under going into this season was 55 and a half games. So they won 63, 64 games last year. So they got a long ways to go to get to that number. And I don't know if they're going to get it based off of how they've been playing this season. Maybe if I see them over a stretch of like maybe 15, 20 games, win, then I'll feel better about them. But so far we haven't seen that. Like, do we think we're going to get it? Do we believe? Or is this team just not going to be as good as they were last year?
Just not as good, straight up.
Yeah, so that's what it feels like right now. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and just kind of see what comes out of that. So, I guess if we want to close it out with these last few Cup teams, because we do have once we get to December 9th, right, we're gonna have that final stretch of Cup games, right, where you have the Eastern side, right, where it's the Heat and the Magic. Then you got the Knicks and the Raptors, and then out west you got Suns, Thunder, Spurs, Lakers, right? How do you guys feel about that in terms of those matchups? Obviously, we're a little ways away, right? A little over a week, right? But is it kind of what we expected, right? Or are there any kind of surprises or shocks in there? I think the Suns is probably one of them, but
yeah,
what do you?
That's probably the only one really. Everyone else I think is kind of standard, and I mean, like, I don't want to what's the word? I guess like belittle the Cup, but like,
right.
It is regular season, but at the same time, like, I guess there is a little bit of a flair to it. But in my opinion, I don't think these are like any heavyweight matchups. You know what I'm saying?
I think it peaked after year one.
Yeah, like it was great year one because it was something brand new. But now that we're in year 3 of this, it's like, all right, well, what's the point? Because it has no ramifications, towards the end of the season outside of the fact that these games do count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can care less about the cup. I think our Adam Silver's an awful, awful, awful. He's just awful, dude. Like this dude hasn't even brought up anything about the scandalism. This dude's just being like, well,
Forgot
what's
about
going
that.
on?
The
Yeah,
Suns
right. What's going on with the Terry Rozier situation? All right, what's going on with the quiet letter situation? He's been quiet about
or the
everything.
Suns, bro. The
Yeah,
Suns owner or whatever.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
he's just been awful. Like this dude's just awful. He tries to get I don't know. Anyways, but going to the cup stuff, I mean, I'm glad my team's there, of course, right? We played the Orlando Magic. We had I think we had the Bucks lose a game against the Knicks, I believe, and that did happen for us to
Yeah.
advance. Hopefully we do win. For content purposes, of course. But I mean um
For real though.
I mean, listen. It is what it is. I will say though, I'll be honest with you. I think the Orlando Magic actually beat us. And the reason why I say that is because Orlando is on a heater right now without Paulo, and I think Miami has taken a little step back just slowly with Tyler returning. I think our pace has slowed down a little bit, and I think it is something to watch out. I think we're playing small ball a little bit too much. I think they do win that game, unless they figure it out sooner than later. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean Orlando is 8-2 in their last 10, right? They got that big win over the Detroit Pistons, and they've kind of found themselves now, right? Where like they were really, really struggling, and Paolo's been out, but you kind of look around and it's like, all right, Desmond Bain, horrible start to the season, looked awful, right? And now he's been much better, better and better every game. Jalen Suggs has been the glue, right? Franz Wagner, Anthony Black off the bench. Now they're kind of finding something with him where he's kind of just been able to get wherever he wants without really being a great outside shooter. So it's starting to feel like the Magic have figured out their identity again. Where we were high on them going into the season, but they were really ugly during the early part. But they figured it out. Now you just kind of have to get it with Paolo back because they were winning games right before Paolo went out. And then they've continued it. So hopefully they can continue it when he comes back. But yeah, that's the thing. Like Cup year one was really cool just because we hadn't seen it before. I still do think a lot of the Cup games have been really fun. Like the Suns OKC one was really good. It's just a matter of that last part, right? The last final bit where it's the final Cup game. And it's, a big motivator for the players because of the money. But you have seen some of the teams just kind of say, no mas, no more in terms of like, all right, we're gonna just try to kind of prioritize getting a little bit healthier,
Yeah.
and we might sacrifice a couple of cup games, but it's a cool thing, right? OKC, they went for it last year. They got annihilated by Milwaukee, right, in that game, but they still ended up kind of figuring it out and won the championship anyway. So it doesn't really have any real ramifications
No.
for the season at large, but it is kind of cool to see, right? Like let's say OKC won the cup, right? Would it all of a sudden make you feel better about
No,
OKC?
no,
No, it's just like
no.
it's kind of
No,
another thing
I'm
that you can add.
I'm gonna be real. The reason these games are entertaining has nothing to do with the cup. It's just they're good matchups. Simple as that. Like I don't think like the reason that these NBA Cup games have been so entertaining is because
Mhm.
people are competing for the cup. Like I just can't see that. There's no
You
way.
don't think so?
No, there's no way. I think they're just hooping. They're just good games. That might be
Well,
a hot take.
what I will say though, I do think some of them are trying because a lot of these players not trying. I mean, obviously they're trying, but I do think they are making them. They're good games because some of these people don't make that much money, right? If you look
Sure.
deep on that roster, you're getting 500K, I believe, right? So like when you get that 500K for a player that's making $1 million, that's not including taxes, like, and you're not making this. So this is like a to us for a job, this would be like a bonus. To
Yeah.
them, this is a huge bonus. So I think the money does play a factor, but I can care less about the cup. But it's not giving the NBA more views or not. It's just it is what it is. And the courts are terrible.
Yeah, some of them are really rough. Which one is it? Is it the Wolves one that's like lime green? And then you have all the red ones, and then the Lakers one was apparently so bad guys were slipping and falling, on the floor. Although I guess that's probably the design as well. But yeah, I don't know. Like just the courts are kind of, I don't know, kind of not a huge fan of a lot of them, right? Like I think in one of the Laker games, right, they switched back to the regular court. And it's like, did you miss the cup court at all? Like were you like, oh, we want the old one back? No, you didn't. You didn't say that at all. So just funny. But just anything else that we're kind of missing, right? Because I think overall, just we're over 20 games into the season. So we're kind of past that quarter point where you're starting to see some more trends, right? But just in general, like what have we kind of seen from a lot of these teams over the course of the season? Because I think the thing that I'm kind of thinking is so cool is just the fact that there's a lot of different styles of play, but it also feels like people are taking some cues from some of these other teams, right? Like the Pacers, we were talking about, oh, they pick up guys from full court. And now everybody's doing it, right? Or, obviously like OKC added the size with the bigs because, now Houston, right, has the giant lineup and everything else. But what do we think so far of the first 20 games of the season as a whole? Just how are you liking it? How are you enjoying it so far, if at all?
It's been entertaining, man. I think the Eastern Conference was something that I think I had talked about in the before the season had started, and I think it's kind of living up to expectations because nobody really knows what's going to happen over there, right? Like you have
Mhm.
Detroit at the top. Granted, they have been losing a little bit here and there recently, but then New York is kind of on their tail. Miami's on their tail, right? So you have all these teams that are kind of just coming out of nowhere. I think like Toronto, like nobody really expected Toronto to be a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. So yeah, I've been really laser focused on the East because I feel like we already know how the West is going to go generally, in terms of OKC at the top. But everyone else is kind of like, falling into place down there. So that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, this season been fun. One, because obviously I can watch a team that's actually winning games, but also the NBA.
Must
A
be
lot of the
nice.
young talent teams are up top. It's not like other teams that have to buy players. The teams that are buying players are in the bottom. Teams that start from the bottom and grind it up. They're the top dogs right now. So I love to see that. Love to see new teams, and I love that the views are up without LeBron James pretty much missing majority of the season so far. Without him, right? Like that was the big question. Like in this NBA, like get more views with no Steph, no LeBron. But I think we'll be fine. I think we do have a lot of young talent. It's kind of funny to watch some bad teams like the Clippers and the Dallas Mavericks. But Cooper Flag has been hooping lately, so good for him.
35
All the
last game against the Clippers, ironically.
yeah, you know what I mean. So the rookie's been hooping. Concanepo. I mean, there's some good guys. This is going to be a fun season for sure. Looking forward to the playoffs. We're not going to rush it, of course. We can
Mhm.
we can we can sim past the All Star Weekend because we can care less about that.
Agree.
Uh, but
Yeah, what
yeah,
is it this time around? It's like it's USA World now,
Yeah, it's
and
like, bro, just
and
give us East West. Let them wear the jerseys, bro. Simple as that.
yo, give me a one on one. Let's get people hooping. Let me get
That too.
KD
okay,
versus. You know what I mean? Let me get KD versus Braun. Bro, everybody will come watch that
Oh
stuff,
yeah,
bro.
for sure. Most
Yeah,
viewed
you
all
know what I
time.
mean? Yeah. So I no more Matt McClung in the dunk contest. I'm
For
tired of
real.
that too.
For real. Agreed.
Just tired of that. Yeah, but yeah, for 20 games in though, it has been fun. Like what? This is 1/4 of the season.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That honestly would kind of be a fun question, like a fun thought exercise. Like, what would your most ideal 1v1 matchups be? And that might be something maybe we'll do over the All Star weekend because we probably won't talk a whole lot about the All Star game and the
Yeah.
event itself. So maybe we'll just make up stuff,
Yeah.
kind of just as thought exercises. So that ought to be fun. So either way, I guess now we'll close it out. Like we normally do, right, where we do our polls and we kind of talk about what people have kind of thought about what we're putting out. And so our last post was about the Miami Heat. Where will the Miami Heat finish this season? So in terms of the responses we got 25% who said top three, 0% 4 to 6, 50% said the play in, 25% said miss playoffs. So it seems like most of the responses think they'll be in the play in. So what do you think? Mr. Miami Heat.
excuse me? Man, listen, dog. These are the same people that said the Lakers are gonna miss the playoffs. All right. You know what I mean? Like, yo, I understand the Miami Heat have been in the plane the last couple of years, but that's also a different team. Everything has been. This is a different team, right? Jaime is sixth man of the year. Norm is having an All Star season, so like this is a whole different team, man. Listen, we'll continue to keep proving people wrong, like we have continued people wrong all the time. When we upset Milwaukee, when we upset the Knicks, when we upset all those teams and went in town and just kept destroying them, we're going to be a top 6 seed. The only way we'll be a playing team if they can't figure out how to play Tyler and Norm together and they continue to keep playing small ball. That's it. But like I said, we got the best coach or one of the best coaches in the NBA who just hit 800 plus wins a couple days ago. So congratulations to him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now we'll be top 6, and honestly, we got our butts kicked pretty bad by Detroit, even though the score was close because we came down We made a comeback in the fourth. We was down 20 without their second best player, so there's no excuse. But I think we'll still be fine.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't see them being worse than top 6. Like to fall to the play-in, that's going to be a hard fall, and I think they're a lot better than some of the play-in teams.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
those teams are currently constructed.
Yeah. The main question would be like if you have Detroit, Knicks, they're going to be in the top 6. And then like the question is right now, like Raptors are 3rd, Heat are 4, Atlanta's 5, and Orlando 6, right? So if they were to fall out of the top 6, then you would have to swap them with one of Cleveland, Toronto, Atlanta, Orlando. And, they
That's
could
fine.
probably finish better than, like one of those teams will probably drop a little bit. Like I could see Toronto falling out of the top 3, and then maybe they drop to like 6, 7, and then Miami just kind of stays where they are, something like that.
Mind you, let me say something.
Yeah.
Let me say something too, right?
Mm.
Orlando still needs to figure out if they can play with Paulo Banchero. The reason why they're winning is because without him. Let's not forget that, right?
Yep.
And two, Atlanta needs to figure out if they can win with Trae Young. So that's another thing. So those teams need to figure it out. And you can say the same thing about Miami. Can Tyler and Norm figure it out, right? So, those are going to be big questions for all these teams to keep staying up high in the standings. But overall, they're definitely going to be top 6. I think Magic still be top 6 too. They're just a good team, and hopefully Paulo can figure it out, and their coaching staff can, get a good scheme going on. But yeah, I mean, we'll be there.
Yeah, and that's really ultimately the question, because if those guys be the best versions of themselves and buy in, then they're going to still win games, and then they're going to be even better than where they were. But everyone, let us know what you all think, right? Of course, if you want to join in on these polls, go to @the_OBT podcast on any of our socials. Also, continue to like and subscribe to our content as well and help the channel grow. We appreciate all the support. Thanks for watching. See you next time.